here we go. We're recording. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to start chapter 2, Genetic and Environmental Foundations. So what are we talking about? Nature or nurture?
Nature.
Nature. And if you get confused between the two, just think of like your mother nurturing you, like holding you and taking care of you. That's an environmental thing. She's nurturing you. That's environmental. Nature is what happens naturally, genetically. All right.
It's confusing because you think environment and you think nature.
Yeah. Yeah. I could see that. That's funny. I never thought of it that way.
That's what I think of at least. So it's like it's difficult sometimes.
Yes. And now I wish you hadn't said that because now everybody's going to be.
Sorry.
That's all right. I'm so used to it, so it won't affect me, but I never really thought about that being such an overlap. But yeah, you're right. Yeah. Well, so, what are genes? How are they transmitted from one generation to the next? Here we go. Genotype. This is what you've inherited. An individual's unique genetic information. This is what your parents give you. Phenotype. What is expressed? Now, our phenotype isn't always a direct result of our genotype. Right? Sometimes there are environmental influences that affect our phenotype. So you could think of it as like body weight, right? We develop, we inherit the predisposition to develop body weight, um, mm, body size, height, um, but in the environment can have an influence on where we fall in that potential range of inheritance, right? So if you get a child whose parents are both tall, but the child isn't receiving adequate nutrition, they're going to be smaller than what their potential was. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So genotype, your genes, phenotype, what's physically expressed. The genetic foundations. So they go backwards. So really it starts, well, kind of. Chromosomes, they store and transmit genetic information made up of genes, which are made up of DNA. So when you look at this, you'll see that a section of your
Yeah, you
chromosome,
can go.
right? So here's your chromosome. You could take a small section, you'll see the DNA strand, and then a section of that are going to be genes.
So
Okay.
are behaviors under genotypes or phenotypes?
Phenotypes.
Okay.
And I don't even know if you consider a behavior a phenotype. Well, no, you could. You could. You could. Let's say you have something like Down syndrome or something, right? It's going to cause a direct physical characteristic difference, but also behavioral differences. So yeah, that'd be your phenotype.
Thank you.
Hmm. So a section of your DNA we call genes. And what do genes do? In short, like what is their job? It's really basic.
Is it that they make you different than everybody else?
They have your genetic code.
Okay, all of this is correct. You both, neither one of you are wrong, but they have one job, though, um, like one function. Yeah, it does. They do provide variability among our species, absolutely, and they are a part of our genetic code that make us unique. But what is their actual job? What do they do physically?
Duplicate?
Huh?
Duplicate? Or are we talking? Oh, we're talking genes, not cells. Never mind.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. Okay, well, the short answer is genes code for proteins. It's that simple. The job of a gene is to code for protein synthesis. Each gene has different uh, codes for creating different proteins. Proteins are what make up our bodies, right? So we have genes that code for protein that make skin cells or bone cells or nervous tissue or connective tissue or blood cells or you name it. Any part of your body, any physical part of your body is made up of protein. And protein is made because these genes say, okay, take that precursor and connect them and make a protein. Now take those proteins, put them together and make that organelle. Now take those proteins, put that together and make a cell membrane. Now take those proteins, put that together and make skin.
It's like a computer almost.
Yes, this is on Friday. Remember when we talked about the purpose of life?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I had the same. So I have for human development, I have an 8:30 and then I have a 2:15 teaching the same thing. And we talked about the meaning of life. And one of the students wasn't having it, right? One of the students was like, that's a very depressing view. And it is to a degree. It's very, like, wow, that's not fun at all. It's very realistic. But someone typed in response to that conversation, a different person said something like, I just feel like we're robots. And they said that's exactly what we are. We're fleshy robots. Seriously. Like even our experiences, like right now, all of us, right now. And you cannot you can try to deny this. You can just go, you know what? That doesn't exist. Right now, all of us, as I speak, if you're hearing me, you have neurons in your brain that are firing to perceive, which means to comprehend and to categorize and all that stuff, to perceive and understand sound. You can't that's happening unless you're deaf, unless you are, you have like nerve damage, right? In your brain. Like okay. So anytime we experience anything right now, after now, before, anytime we experience something, we have neurons that fire in response to it. If we're paying attention, that has a direct response. That has a direct impact on our future behaviors, on our future thoughts. Like right now, I am influencing your brain's function, not just now, but in the future. Anytime you have a conversation with someone, it may not be that meaningful, it may not be that impactful, but there's a slight change every time you experience something. And so we go through life going through a series of just constant experiences. I mean, even when we're sleeping, our brain is constantly working. It's constantly reorganizing. It's constantly changing, constantly adapting to plastic and everything that happens to us has an impact on our future decisions, has an impact on our future thoughts, our behaviors, our feelings. We are robots. We are computers in the sense that for a computer to work, it has a code. And all that code is a series of ons and offs. And you could have the basic, most simplest computer code of, I don't know, just one key being on and one, representing off. That's it. Then they take a bunch of those, thousands, millions of literally ones and zeros that represent something. the letter A on a screen, something, right, that they want it to code for. It's just ons and offs. That's it. This part is off, that part is on, this part is on, that one is off, that one, and that represents D. And that's exactly what your brain is doing. We have all of these neurons, and when some of them are on and others are off, it means something different. When we look at that, a candle, we have a series of ons and the rest of them are off. Because if the other ones were on also, it would mean something else, or it would be confusing. This is why when we try to answer questions, and we can't, like in an exam or something, or let's say I asked you, you know how I asked you earlier, do you remember the example, Mael got it right, the example I gave for a history graded event. So Mael started to, using her frontal lobe, started to search the rest of the brain. It sent out signals to the rest of the brain to fire in different spots until it hit one or a bunch that meant something related, because she was recalling that conversation, so she was trying to find it. And so she's got the executive function that says go find that conversation, and there are neurons throughout the brain that are coding for that conversation. And so it sent the message to other parts of the brain to find those neurons that all represented the ons for that conversation. And she found it. So memory is nothing more than the refiring of neurons that fired when you first experienced it. It's just not all of them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Anyone?
Yes.
I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Now you see how I just went off there. I just went nuts on that conversation. Why do you think I did that? Because it's entertaining to me? I mean, it is, but why would I do that? We weren't talking
Because
about
it's
it.
really important.
It is, Heather. It is really important. Now, what? Gosh, Heather, why is it important? Do you know why it's important, Heather? Or you just assume?
Because it's really important for us to understand why we are the way that we are. So we have to
Yes.
understand where it all starts.
Yes, yes, yes. That's exactly right. It's the foundations of understanding who we are and why we are. Bravo. Or brava. I don't know what people say. Exactly. Well done. I'll go back to sharing. Because it all feeds in. All right. Uh-oh. Can you not see this?
No.
Yeah, you can't. All right, hold on a second. Let's try that again. This one. And share. Does anyone have any questions or anything to add regarding that? You're like, no, it's too early for this kind of level of thinking. Okay. Meiosis, the process of cell division that creates gametes. Our gametes are our sex cells. They would be sperm cells for the males and the oocytes or ovum for the females. Ova, plural. So each one of our sex cells, we call them haploid. They have not 23 pairs for a total of 46 chromosomes. They have only 23 chromosomes. Okay, it isn't until they unite that we get our full 46 or our full 23 pairs. So what do I want you to know? I want you to know that when fertilization occurs, we go from our haploid state of the ovum and the sperm cell having 23 to combining to make 23 pairs. And once that happens, we call it, and here's the important part, the fertilized egg, a zygote. You see, it says it facilitates genetic variability by having half from mom and half from dad. When they combine and you make your own sex cells, your own gametes, you're taking a random selection of the half that you've gotten from your mother and your father. Now it's randomized, and then yours combined with another set of random, and it just keeps making variability among us. And why is that adaptive? Why do we say that variation or variability is key to survival?
Maybe because if you don't adapt in a world that's changing, you won't be able to survive.
That is the answer. Who was that?
Emily,
Okay, good. Emily, you have good thoughts. Emily said, I'm going to say the same thing, but just add a few words or move a few words. Emily's saying that when the world changes, we have to have different abilities to adapt, because if we didn't, essentially, if there was one thing about the world that changed and we were all equally sensitive to it, we would all die. So there has to be some of us that are capable of surviving. Or let's say it's not even that. Let's say it's not a matter of life or death, as in like we all die if we don't have variations. But what if the world changes? What if the world doesn't even change? But by having variability, regardless, we could still survive, but now we could survive even better. As in, like, we live longer. As in, because think about it, we are living longer, right? So we can last longer now. And that wasn't because necessarily an environmental pressure, although it probably was, doesn't necessarily have to be, just that we got better because we found all these variations among us. Some were not good and that didn't work out, and those individuals with that variation died earlier. But others lived longer and they made babies with the same, they passed it on, and then they lived longer. And then they found other people who were living longer, and they both shared theirs, and then they had a mutation of their own and they lived longer, and on and on and on. That's why we say variability is adaptive. It's necessary, not just for a life or death situation, but also for life enhancement. Questions or comments? Okay. So we have 23 pairs of chromosomes in each of our cells. Okay. The first 22 we call autosomes. Get in the zone, the autosome. The last pair we call the 23rd pair are sex chromosomes. X from mom always, and X or Y from dad. X or Y from dad. If we get X from mom and X from dad, we're female, genetically. If we get X from mom and Y from dad, we're male, genetically. So again, we call our gametes the sex cells. They are the sperm and the ovum. And we call a fertilized cell, a fertilized egg, a zygote. Twins. So one of the first ways that we wanted to identify what traits or characteristics were linked to inheritance. Yes, Mendel did look at pea plants and flowers and crossbred and created, oh, that's true with plants. But one of the things that we could do easily when we're looking at humans prior to our ability to identify what DNA was, what it looked like, how it worked, we could just look at identical twins. We look at identical twins who were raised apart. and compare them to identical twins who were raised together. Now we can look at fraternal twins raised apart and fraternal twins raised together. So does that doesn't make any sense. So we have identical and non-identical twins. So identical twins means that they started from one zygote that when before it multiplied to make a human, it went bloop and it made two of them and two different humans that were identical. Two zygotic, two zygotes means that the mother had released two eggs from her ovary and two eggs were fertilized. So they are just basic siblings, just like any other sibling, who just happen to be in the womb at the same time. Does that make sense?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, you know, how sometimes you hear like somebody's like, oh, I used to have a twin, but like I ate it in the womb. Like, what does that mean? Like a twin just like disappears in the womb.
So it could mean a few different things. Obviously, they don't eat the right the sibling. What ends up happening is the sibling likely did not have a functioning or a well functioning placenta. Um, and what does that mean? It means that where the baby gets the nutrients from the mother and the baby releases its waste to the mother through the placenta, if it's not formed well into the uterine wall, then the baby will not receive sufficient nutrition and the baby will not thrive. So the baby then uh, will pass. It'll wither, right, before it becomes anything substantial. When they say that they ate the sibling, what they're referring to is the idea that whatever the baby's uh, whatever the baby that didn't thrive or didn't make it, its nutrition, its value was absorbed by the one that was developing.
Gotcha.
Does
Thank
that
you.
really make sense?
Yes.
Oh wow. Okay.
I was just always like, I went to school with a girl that said that, and I was like, what the heck do you even mean? It's like so strange to hear.
Yeah. No, they didn't really do anything. It's a obviously we have what are called active processes and we have what are called passive processes. And so an active process is where there's like an intentional goal of doing something, or there's something that an individual or an organism is making an effort to do something. Passive is where something happens to them without them making an effort to do it. It's a passive process.
Okay.
Yeah. So why would we look at, if we wanted to understand the role of genetics, why would we look at identical twins who are raised together and compare them to identical twins who are raised apart?
Well, twins that are raised together are going to have a stronger bond, whereas ones that aren't as close to each other, it's going to be an entirely different outcome, right?
Okay, you're not wrong, because in theory, people who are raised together are going to develop some sort of bond. You're right. And if they're not raised together, then they're not going to develop a bond. But when it comes to genetics, what are they interested in?
Are they interested in like seeing like how like alike they are, or like to see if spending time apart, if they're still going to exhibit like the same traits and stuff?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Now, what kind of traits would they be looking at?
Like probably like personality, or like
That's
how they
exactly
like
right.
how they do stuff.
What else? Keep going.
Like how they maybe how they like handle things, or
Good.
what they're attracted to. Are they
Good.
attracted to the same things? Are they do they prefer different things? Like who will they end up marrying? Do they marry the same type of people? all that, you know, do they have
Correct.
the same type of values as each other?
Good. Yes,
Yeah.
Alicia. Right. Alicia, what's your major?
Oh, I was a chemistry major, and then like now I'm like going into nursing. So I did take
Okay.
anatomy and physiology. So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Good. Then you are doing well.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
You're welcome. So when you look at identical twins who were raised together and compare them to identical twins who were raised apart, what you can extrapolate is, if you want to know, for example, to what degree do our genes have an impact on, we'll go with Alicia's example, our values, our morals. To what degree do our genetics have on that? So what we do then is if we look at identical twins who are raised together and give them a survey separately, you know, in a different room at a different, you know, they were raised together, and we give them an interview, a questionnaire, or whatever, you know, and find out what their values are and see how similar they are. Then we'll look at identical twins who were raised apart and give them the same survey. And we see how similar those two are. And so if identical twins who were raised together, and I'm just throwing random numbers out, if they had and they would come up with some way to compile to analyze, if they had, say, an 80% similarity in values, identical twins raised together, and identical twins who were raised apart had a 60% similar, what does that give us? What does that tell us? What can we guess from that? Identical twins raised together are 20% more similar in values than identical twins raised apart. What does that mean?
Maybe because they were raised by the same person who showed them the same values and things.
Well done. What it does, very good. Who was that?
Emily?
Good job. What it does is it tells us the role of the environment. Very good. And by having them 60% similar, it tells us the 60% tells us the role of the genes. And the remaining 20% difference tells us the role of the environment. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Good. Well done. So all I can see on my screen is Patrick. And I see two other people's blank screens. But Patrick, does this make sense, bud?
Oh yeah.
Okay. All right. Probably so much sense that you're bored. All right, we'll move on then. Well, before we do, now these are important. These are foundations, like Heather said, right? Why would we look at fraternal twins?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, why not?
Versus identical twins?
Well, okay, let's say we looked at fraternal twins raised together and fraternal twins raised apart. What are we
Well, there's
looking
no
for?
same genetics there, so you'd basically, it would be the same as looking at any other siblings, really.
Exactly. Exactly. So then what are we really looking for then? Because they don't carry the same genetics.
Just family environment.
Exactly. Very good, Patrick. The role of the environment. Well done. Nice job. All right. I'm very impressed by this class. I love this class. Okay. Alleles. Alleles, when you think of an allele, think of eye color, right? So, Patrick, I think you have brown eyes. Blue? What do you got?
Yeah.
Brownish, right? All right. I have bluish. So, I have the blue alleles, and you have at least one brown allele. Okay.
Hmm.
It just means a form of a gene. That's all. That's all alleles are. Okay. So, now we're going to talk about dominant and recessive, looking at here, right? So in this case, we're not looking at eye color. We're looking at something called phenylketonuria. It's a disease. Okay, it's a recessive trait, but we can still get the idea. Maybe that's not a good one to use. What do we got here? No, that's not a good idea. Okay, well, I'm going to go back. Okay, but you can see that you have the large N and the little p. A large letter is symbolizing a dominant allele, meaning it will be expressed as long as you have one that came from mom or dad. So we could change these to eye color, right? When you look at brown and blue, we represent brown with a big letter B and blue with a little letter B, because blue is recessive. So if I had a brown allele from either my mother or my father, and the other one was the blue, I'd have brown eyes. But I would be a big B, little b, like the two in the middle there. I'd be a carrier for the blue. You see? So the father and the mother are both what we call heterozygous. They're carrying one of each kind, a dominant and a recessive trait. N stands for, in this case, normal, dominant. And the P stands for recessive because it's lowercase, and it's representing P from phenylketonuria. And I'll explain what that means in a second. It's a disease, a rare disease. So both the father and the mother are both heterozygous. They're both carriers. Okay. So they have 4 different children. Okay. And they have 4 different options. The reason why the 2 in the middle are considered 2 different options is because each one of them is giving something different between the 2. In the first case, the father is giving, I don't know if it really, yeah. In the first case, the father is giving the smaller one on the left, in the middle left, the recessive. So it makes that child a carrier. And then on the one on the right, the mother's giving the recessive and makes that child a carrier. But the father on the right is giving the dominant, and the mother on the left is giving to that one a dominant. So it makes them both carriers, but they're normal because they have the dominant normal. Okay. Now the son looked like a son on the left here is getting both the dominant from the mother and the dominant from the father. So it's what we call a homozygous, homo meaning the same, homozygous trait. Then it's hetero, and it's homozygous dominant on the left, and then it's homozygous recessive. In this case, the father and the mother are both giving that child the recessive allele. And now, because there's no dominant to cover it, they have the phenotype. So here's the genotype that you can see, but they also have the phenotype, which is the inability to break down phenylalanine. That's the problem. And so what ends up happening is people diagnosed with phenylketonuria, when they eat or drink foods that have phenylalanine in it, it kills brain cells. And so slowly over time, they become mentally incapacitated. Mile, you have a question? Oh. So does anybody have a pack of gum near them?
Would Tic Tacs count?
No, I don't think so. Maybe.
I
Does
have
anybody
some gum. Give me a second.
All right, I'm gonna stop sharing. Who has the gum?
I do.
Okay.
Alicia.
All right. So you say Alicia? Is that how you pronounce your name? Not Alicia? Of course it would be Alicia. Alicia's fancier. So once Alicia gets back from the store, hopefully she'll turn her camera on and show us in the ingredients. It says, is that a rabbit?
Yes.
Oh my Lord.
This is Penelope.
Oh my lovely. Now Alicia is going to look at the ingredients on the gum. You don't need to open it. And you're going to find phenylalanine.
Oh, here. Yes, this says contains phenylalanine.
Yes. Can you put that towards the screen so they can see it? And that's not going to be possible, but that's okay. Everyone, when you see your gum, thank you, Alicia. When you see your gum, you're going to see that it has phenylalanine. It has a warning for people diagnosed with PKU. So people diagnosed with PKU can't chew gum. Just a fun fact. Okay. Thank you, Alicia. That's a lot of work. But you know what? It was worth it to meet Penelope. Totally worth it.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Go back to the PowerPoint. All right. Now I'm going to go back. Okay. So dominant recessive inheritance. Only the dominant allele affects the child's characteristics. That's not necessarily true if you have 2 recessive, right? The recessive allele can be passed to children, and this leads to many serious disabilities and diseases because of recessive alleles. Obviously, blue eyes are not a disease, but you get the idea. X-linked inheritance. Now think about that before we cover it. X-linked. When you have X, what are we thinking about?
The mother.
Okay, what do you mean? Correct.
Because women are XX and
Good.
XY.
Good. So what I was looking for was, I'm thinking of my 23rd pair, the X I got from my mom and the whatever I got from my dad. Correct. So if we have something that is X linked, it means a specific trait or characteristic that could be good, normal, or bad. Who do you think it's going to harm more? If it's, let's do this, forgive me. If it's a disease that's linked specifically to the X chromosome, who is it going to harm more?
The mother? Or are you talking about like kids?
Yeah, is it going to harm boys or girls more?
Oh, girls.
It's actually boys.
Boys.
Now, why is it boys? And whoever said girls, I totally understand it because you're like, well, because I got 2 of them. But why is it actually boys?
Because they only get one
girls-
X chromosome, so they only really have one chance to get a good X.
Very good, because if they
Yeah.
got a bad X, the other X will cover up for it. That's exactly right. Well done.
That's really how it works. Like the other one will cover up for it.
Yep.
It's like substitution, basically.
Yep. That's exactly right. They go, tag, I'm not in on this one. I can't code for that protein. And someone's like, I got it. I'm your backup. Okay. So the reason why is because they don't have the other parts of the X. They have the shorter version of the Y. And so it's somewhere outside of that version that would have been to make an X. Does that make sense? Everybody good with that? I'm going to stop recording. We'll finish chapter 2.